Well, Notts County have made huge strides over the last few years under the shrewd ownership of the Reedtz brothers. But last season, do we want to say it was a backward step? Possibly not, because 14th isn't a disaster for a newly promoted club with a top 10 budget. But it did feel a bit like a backward step, because after looking so irresistible going forward and playing such good football, scoring so many goals with Jodi Jones laying off Macaulay Langstaff. They looked like a serious force in the promotion race, but the defensive issues got the better of them in the end, and they didn't find the solutions. And that's what Notts County have got to fix. Now, hopefully the Reedtz brothers have learned a few lessons. A few of the signings they've made this summer do point towards that. But what else have they got to do? It's going to be about more than overhauling the defensive personnel. What are the nuances they've got to address in order to fix their defensive woes? That's what we're going to be talking about on this summer deep dive. Yes, welcome along to this EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive. I'm going to be joined by Tom Williams, who I'll bring in 1 second, but this is one of many Summer Deep Dives that we're going to be doing on EFL Debate between mid-June and mid-July. Already a few uploaded to YouTube and to Spotify, so go and check those out once you're done with this one. For now, delighted to be joined, hopefully, if the internet holds up, by Tom Williams from the excellent Not to Talk About podcast, and also from the social media scene on the EFL and non-league. Tom, good morning to you.
Good morning, Gav. Hopefully this works now. I've had to join on my phone to try and make this work. So not the best angle of me, but I'm afraid. But hopefully you can hear me loud and clear.
We've made it work. Tom, reflect for me on last season.
It's an up and down season, I think. Context, I think, has to be applied, because if you looked at it on the face of it, I think a lower mid-table finish would have been. I don't think it would have been taken by a lot of fans simply because of how we came into the season with momentum. But when you take all emotion out of it, finishing lower mid-table as a newly promoted side, never really in any danger of no danger of going down at all. I think you would say it's a success. So it's a tough one to evaluate on that basis, because obviously when we did this deep dive last summer, there was a lot of positivity and a lot of hope that we could go back to back. So it's a mixed one on that basis, because obviously, and as we're going to get into, I'm sure we started so well and we didn't finish so great. So I think it's an up and down season is how I would evaluate it.
What are the big... Let's go big picture here. That we know how good Notts County were going forward last season, and I'm sure we'll come on to that. But I think the real big question here, Tom, is how Notts County solved their defensive problems from last season. And as I see it, I think it's got to be a combination of things. So improving the defence, which we'll come on to, is a big thing. I also think having a stronger midfield, and hopefully Matty Palmer will fit all season, is going to help. And then I look at it, I think your wing-backs are going to need to be a little bit more defensively switched on at certain moments. And then I think you're going to need more aggressive pressing from the front. So those are the 4 things that I think are going to need to change for Notts County to become a more efficient unit. Do you agree with those 4, or would you add anything else to that list?
Yeah, no, I think you've kind of summed it up kind of perfectly. I think we probably need to add a goalkeeper. We've transfer listed Aidan Stone, and we haven't really seen too much of Tiernan Brooks. We've seen a little bit of him. He's a young goalkeeper for us. He's been out on loan in the National League, but whether he can... I think a lot of fans would be a lot more confident if we had a sort of established number 1 playing, someone with, like Colchester side Matt Macy, someone of that kind of ilk, where you feel really confident before the season's even started that you've got one of the keepers that can play 46 games for you, although I suppose Macy hasn't done 46 before, really. But, I think you get my point. I think, midfield, we need another one. We've lost Badger Army just last week to Burton. He would have been kind of... I think he's an interesting one. I think he's going to go to Burton. I think he's going to start for them. I think for us, he probably would have been a cover for midfield and centre-back. just because of how it's gone for him at Notts. But I think, we need another midfielder, and then we've already started making defensive recruits. I think up front we're fine, and I think that the tweaks in style of play will come from the management team. We already started to see a few of them last season, and I think that we'll probably see a lot more of how they want to play with these new signings. I'm sure we'll come on to those new centre backs very shortly, but I think that's already a sign of where they feel we need to address, and I think that has to be the big positive, that we've gone away and we are only in mid-June. I know that because the Euros are on and things like that, people are probably thinking the season, there's football on all the time, so the season feels closer than it is, but we're only in mid-June and we've already brought in 2 central defenders. I think there's a really positive start to our summer.
I maybe a little bit controversially, I don't think this is a sort of a uniformly held view among Notts County fans, but I loved the statement from the Reedtz brothers. I think it was around mid-April when they released it, saying we acknowledge that the season hasn't gone exactly as we'd hoped. We appreciate that there's lessons to be learnt. We're fully behind Stuart Maynard, and we believe that he's the right person to lead us forward. And we're going to be very data-driven in how we approach things and how we try and find the solutions to some of the mistakes that we've made. I thought that was a really good statement, and I think bringing clarity on the managerial situation, for me, I think was a really big positive step, because you're going into the last few games with the fans knowing where the board are with Stuart Maynard. And I think that sort of clarity and transparency is something I think a lot of clubs would envy, a lot of fan bases would envy.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I was in the same camp as you. I thought it was a great statement. And what I liked about it was that he put to bed the conversation of him going. There was a lot of murmurings. There were people with signs or banners in the crowd. There were people on social media clamoring for him to go, and I think that was never going to happen. But I think that the fact the owners came out, it kind of squashed that sort of small but vocal section of the fan base. And I appreciate everyone has their right to say and be vocal.
Absolutely, absolutely,
100%. But at the same time, it was great for the unity at the club, which has been so important over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. Is the unity at maybe 24 months, the unity has been really, really good amongst the fan base. And I think it brought that back a little bit. And I think it also reminded us that we have to trust in these owners who so far haven't got a lot wrong. It's been a steady progression. Yes, we didn't bounce straight back to the EFL, but we've got there now in a much stronger position. There's a lot of talk off the field. We've just launched a new fan zone, the Nest, which is already looking really, really positive for the club. And I think that statement that you mentioned kind of just allayed the fear a little bit. And it kind of, by that point, the season was already over. Like, there was nothing to play for. So I think that at that stage, it just calmed everything down a little bit and kind of reminded us that we're in this for the long haul. Under these owners, it's always been a slow but steady progression, and I think that's kind of that statement really just perfectly put an end to that sort of murmurings.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think Stuart Maynard, as a tactician and as a manager, has got to learn from? Because I think he did a really good job, first of all, at Wealdstone, both stylistically and in terms of results. And then, I mean, I came across him. I spoke to him very briefly at Wembley at the League Two playoff final, and he seems like quite an open, approachable sort of person. So I imagine that translates to his man management style. But what do you think he's got to learn as a manager this summer?
Yeah, he's very open. He's been when he was manager of Wealdstone, he was very good with me. He kind of let me come into their training and see what's going on. So I'm very fortunate to have had that insight, and that was why I was so happy when he was appointed, and he was my number one choice to be the replacement for Luke Williams. On the other side of that coin, I think that it kind of I can understand why Notts fans, from what they've seen just at Notts, aren't fully convinced by him, because had I not had that insight from Wealdstone, watching his teams, and also just that experience going in, I perhaps wouldn't have the same opinion that I do of him if I just had the Notts sample. So I completely understand that viewpoint from the fan base. I think the biggest learning curve for him is twofold. Is one, it's the first step into full-time football for him for a long time, probably since his sort of younger playing days at Watford, and also there's the step into League Two, where stylistically it's actually very different to the National League. For example, you've got Wealdstone in the National League who continuing to try and play that way. If you had that sort of budget in League Two, I don't think you'll find many sides who have got the smallest budget in the league, or the joint smallest with Oxford City, who also played that way. The two smallest budgets in the National League both look to play possession-based football. If that was the case in League Two, I think you're much more likely to find can kind of crash it into the two centre forwards who, a bit more solid. Try and
right. So you think the National League is a more progressive division than League Two?
I think from style, I'm not saying it's higher quality. I think that it's perhaps higher quality in terms of stylistically. There's more progressive teams. I think that the biggest learning curve I found from last season was the level of quality from the National League to League Two is bigger than I thought. Just in terms of again, we'll take that example. A Wealdstone won't punish you if you give them chances, but if you give chances to a team that finished lower mid-table, well, Notts, for example, who is low mid-table, you give chances to that team that they will take them in League Two. So I think that's the biggest difference there, and that's another thing for Stuart Maynard to sort of to learn. But what I actually like about the fact that Stuart Maynard is he's also on a kind of learning discovery with Notts as a fan base, because it has been a long time since he's been away from the EFL. 4 years is a sizable amount of time, and a lot changes in those 4 years. So he's almost in a similar position to what we were 12 months ago in a weird way. But I think the biggest thing will be the tactically for Notts. That was the biggest thing, and for him as well. You come up against teams who are a little bit more direct than the National League, I think, and that takes time to adjust to, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the goalkeeping spot then, Tom, because as you've alluded to, you've got Tiernan Brooks, who was on loan at Rochdale, and Jim McNulty, who encourages a similar style of football to what Notts County wants to play, which could be an advantage for him. But the dilemma, as I see it, is that even if Aidan Stone, you are able to offload Aidan Stone, which isn't a given, Tiernan Brooks isn't going to be happy being third choice goalkeeper unless you do loan him out. But if you intend to keep Tiernan Brooks in the squad, then you've got Sam Slocum there. So is there going to be the space to bring in another goalkeeper, I suppose, will be my question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think we're in a dilemma in that area because of that. We've got three goalkeepers who, like you say, all are there. I think Slocum is probably the easiest one, because I think he's getting towards the back end of his playing career. I'm not retiring him, it's up to his choice, but I think he will start to look towards coaching. And if I'm honest, I'm surprised he wasn't announced as the new goalkeeping coach after Tom Wheel was left or relieved. It wasn't clear if he left or was relieved of his duties, but I was surprised he wasn't sort of made player goalkeeping coach. And I think that's kind of the steps he'll start to take. So I think Slocum is a good player to have, because if he's happy being sort of a backup, he's a very experienced backup, and he came to the side at times last season when needed. But then you've got the other two, who I think you're right. I think Stone will want to be a number one, but like you say, it's not a given that we offload him. There's been no movement there so far from what we can see. And I know from his post social media, I think he's a new dad and things like that. So he might, personal aspects might mean he might want to stay settled, and that might make that move difficult with a young family to try and sort of offload someone. And then Tiernan Brooks is a big summer for him. It's a really, really big summer for him, because for the last 2 summers it's been is this a season where Tiernan becomes number one? And that question keeps rolling on, and he gets a year older every year.
Well, it's almost now or never, isn't it, Tom? Because it's like when you've done well, if you've done, I'm not actually sure how well Tiernan Brooks has or hasn't done on loan at Rochdale. I'm not particularly knowledgeable on that. But let's say he's had a good loan at Rochdale. It's almost the point where you can't, it's almost past the point where you can loan him out again. So that's the kind of question that I would ask.
Yeah, and I think it's for him as well. Like you say, I think he's had like kind of half a season at Rochdale, and an ideal world, you loan him out again to the National League for a full season as number one. But we know with goalkeepers, it can be volatile. It can be, you go to somewhere you don't get the number one spot, or we might get an injury and we have to recall him. And that's kind of how it's felt for Tin. It's been very stop-start. He's had a chance in the first team. then he's lost his place because someone's come back or he's got injured or suspended or whatever, and it's never really gone in a linear fashion. And I'm a big believer with goalkeepers. You have to back them 100%. And I think that would be my one big criticism of Luke Williams actually last season, was that as soon as Aidan Stone had a bit of a shaky-ish start, he was taken out of the team for Sam Slocum. And after that, I think our goalkeeping situation never really recovered. We had a number one who the fans no longer kind of saw as number one because he'd been dropped, and it's very difficult to come back from that. So to answer your question, the original question, is there space for another number one? I think we have to make space for one. That it relies on offloading one of the other two. Is Tiernan Brooks going to be happy being loaned out? I'm not sure. So then you have the decision of, do you back him as the number one and start him this season, or do you have to sell him? And he feels a little bit like a typical Notts player who we let go, and then in 3 or 4 years' time, you look back and go, we had that guy and we let him go. So, and we shouldn't have let him go because he's now number one in League One or whatever. So, it's a very, very difficult situation, the goalkeeper one, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, it's not a guarantee that you're able to offload Aidan Stone, because that's going to require someone coming in with an offer for him as well. So yeah, that's going to be a really difficult decision, and Notts County have got to get that one right. I guess I'm looking at the defence. You've got lots of cover on the left side of defence. Jacob Doe, which I'm sure we'll come on to. Kyle Cameron, as things stand, is currently at the club as well. You've got Adam Chickson, who can play as a left centre-back. And also, I think Lucien Mahovo can play, is an option for left centre-back as well. Because so that's going to be a really competitive area, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And it's actually a weird one, because I think we're a bit unbalanced in the back three. A lot of teams, there's always that conversation that a left-footed centre-back is so hard to come by. It's actually the position we're probably the most stocked and stacked in at the back, because, like you say, Lucien Mahovo is actually a really promising young player, probably our standout young player. He'd be the one that I would tip if anyone. He's sort of got that physical presence, I think, to adapt to the man's game. He's tall and athletic, and I think he could slot straight in. I think we might loan him out to National League. But the point I'm making is that you kind of would want him to be your sort of second choice or third choice who can step in. But as it stands, he's probably fourth choice at the left centre-back. Whereas on the right, we've got Lewis Macaulay and not a lot else. So I think we're a little bit unbalanced at the back, which kind of, I think we have to bring in another right-footed central defender, unless you then push Kyle Cameron over as the central cover. But again, he's not really his strongest position. I think his strongest position is the left of the back three. So, and again, whether he, like you said, as it stands, he's currently at the club. It's unclear whether he will become the start of the season. So,
sorry, Macaulay is this?
This is Kyle Cameron. Sorry, a bit Macaulay. Obviously,
yes.
Yeah, Macaulay. I think Macaulay will start for us at right centre back. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if we brought in a new right central defender. But I think it would all come down to your budget and can you afford to carry. I think as it stands, we've got 4 first choice central defenders really, with Cameron, Macaulay, Platt, and Bedeau, and then I think you need another one. If you're playing the back three, you probably need 5, with someone like Chickson who can sort of cover. So I think in a weird way, it's a shame that Lucien Mahovo isn't a right-sided player, because I think he would cover that position absolutely fine.
Yeah, well, that's sometimes that's how it works out, isn't it? You can never quite sort of predict these things. But I wanted to talk to you about Jacob Bedeau, Tom, because I think I'm absolutely delighted for you that you've been able to bring in a player of that's got his range of qualities, because I think the pace that he brings is going to be so important in terms of dealing with those 1v1 situations, his strength as well, and coupled with his ball playing ability to fit into the system. I think he's got such a range of qualities there that I think he's going to be a really good fit for this side.
Yeah, and I've got to give you your plaudits there, because you suggest. I remember you saying in the message. I could probably find it a couple of months ago now. You said he'd be the one that you would be the ideal fit for Notts, and I think he's also one. I know that other podcasts talk about him a lot. I think he's a player that is a lot of people are big fans of from a neutral perspective, and when that is the case, it's always brilliant that your club brings them in. I think a lot of fans have seen him arrive and have looked at him and gone, "Oh yeah, no nonsense centre back," but he's actually very, very comfortable on the ball as well.
He's not a no nonsense centre back at all.
No, exactly. So, and he's got quality and he's got pace, and it's the ideal signing. It's the perfect signing for us, I think. The only question it throws up is Kyle Cameron, who's lost his captaincy as well. It's probably been quite a difficult few weeks for him on a personal level. And he's been a massive part of our journey of the last 3 seasons. So I wonder what it means for him moving forward. But for just on Jacob Badeau, it's for me, it's a brilliant signing, and I'm absolutely over the moon that he is a Notts County player.
Yeah, I've got no doubt that Kyle Cameron will be as professional as he needs to be for next season and continue to be a valuable sort of member of the squad. But I do think that even with the best will in the world, it's a difficult dynamic to go from being a captain to being not the captain, to go from being a regular starter to being a sort of more of a squad player. That's always going to be a difficult one. So I do wonder if it's going to be best for Kyle Cameron, especially with somebody like Mahova coming through, to actually get some regular football somewhere else. So hopefully he can do that if that's what's decided is best. But then you brought in Matty Platt as well, who the one thing I would say Jacob Badeau isn't an absolute specialist in is probably the aerial side, although I think he can do a job there. But Matty Platt for me is one who can head crosses out of the box all day long and be that defensive presence, whilst also having the ball playing nice, having been part of Ian Everett's Barrow side.
Yeah, 100%, and I think that's what he's been brought in to do is for that aerial presence, which we have lacked. Certainly have lacked. We were the second shortest team in League Two last season, and I think that we've probably gone up a couple of places alone on his arrival. He's absolutely massive, and it's not just that his size, his literal size, it's his presence he brings as well at the back. And when you watch him play, like you say, he can win headers into the box all day long, and I think that's what we needed. I think that Aidan Baldwin is a fantastic central defender, and I think he's going to go and do really good things for Bradford. I really do think that, and actually he is comfortable in the air, but I think Platt brings that little bit more presence. Whilst we may not get, he can play a pass. Don't get me wrong, I've seen him play some pretty good passes. He might not be as frequent as an Aidan Baldwin, but I think under this management team we'll see less of that. It's still very possession-based principles, but I think it's very much more the centre-backs don't have to play 30-yard crossfield passes. It's especially the central defender. I think it'll be much more simple passes, and I've got no doubt that Platt can do that. And like you say, playing in Ian Everett's Barrow side. So again, another really good signing. Absolutely delighted with both central defenders we put in, and just briefly on Kyle Cameron, I feel for him on a personal level, just because kind of 12 months ago there were rumours of him going to Stockport, and it's like a sliding doors moment. He decided to stay, sign a new contract, and had he gone there, and you don't know, he might not have been the starting left centre back, but if he had, he'd be a League One player. Yeah. So it just goes to show that in football things can change really quickly. But as it stands, those two signings, obviously haven't seen them kick a ball for Notts yet, but as it stands, I'm really, really happy with both of them.
Well, that's the way. That's football, isn't it? All credit to Kyle Cameron for the loyalty that he showed as captain, and I'm sure Notts County fans are incredibly grateful for the part that he's played and may continue to play in this journey. At the same time, football is a very ruthless business, and if you want to be competitive, you've got to make difficult decisions that will hurt people at times. And so that's tough for Kyle Cameron, but I trust him as a professional to pick himself up and be a big part of the squad for Notts County if he needs to be, or find himself a home where he can start regularly. So I want to talk in a little bit more detail about Lewis Macaulay, Tom, because this is somebody who I think from memory, he actually took a while to get into the side after signing, because Luke Williams is very big on not throwing players in straight away, because he likes to give them a bit of time to sort of get used to the way that the team plays. Do you think Lewis Macari is at the stage now where Notts County can really rely on him as that outside centre half?
Yeah, I think he is 100%. You're right. It took him a while. His loan spell was good. Then we got him on a permanent in January. It was kind of confirmed before January that we were going to sign him because his contract was up at Stoke, and we didn't see him for quite a while. And then he's got back into the team. He's a very, very reliable player. From what I've been told by his coaches at Stoke, and from what I can see, he's an excellent trainer. He'll be the one that sets the standards. In the youth teams, he's obviously a leader. He's one of the younger players in his Notts County group, but I've no doubt he still sets standards, and you can see that in the way he plays. The kind of likeness I can draw with him is him and Aidan Baldwin. With Baldwin, I'm not sure Macaulay will put in the sort of 9 or 10 out of 10 performances that Baldwin was capable of. Mm-hmm. But in a similar vein, I don't think he'll put in the lower level performances that Baldwin would sometimes put in. And he's much more, from Macaulay, you know what you're going to get every week. It's 6, 7, 8 out of 10 every week. And I think that in a back three in League Two, that's a really underrated quality to have, for that reliability.
Yeah, hopefully he can provide that, and then probably looking at a couple more defenders to come in for depth. But then I think the really interesting topic for Notts County, I think, for me, is the wing backs, because on the one hand, I think it's great that you've got 2 attacking wing backs that can be really dangerous going forward, and especially Jodi Jones, who was an absolute delight to watch at times last season. I'm not even going to criticise either of them for getting caught too high up the field on turnovers, because I think that if you are going to play with that attacking mindset, it's kind of a given that it's going to be down to the wide centre halves to defend those wide areas when Jones and Maynard are high up the pitch. But I do think that there is an issue when opposing sides do have possession, maybe longer spells of possession, that you need your wing backs in when they come back to actually stay a bit more switched on, because otherwise it becomes a lot harder for those wide centre halves.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's going to be greater onus on them to get back a little bit more. And I think that right wing back's a really interesting position, because we've only really got Aaron Lemaine there. And I think we may look at bringing in a more defensively minded wing back on that side to give us a little bit of balance, because we've got that on the other side. We can bring Chickson in. Mm-hmm. We can move Jodi Jones across to the right and play Chickson. We've tried that before. Wheelstone did it as well. They did it at Wheelstone a lot of the time, using an opposite side sort of dribbler, like they used Taron Alarakia on the left, left wing back. He's a right-footed winger, really, and they tried that and it worked for them. It didn't quite work for Notts this season, and I think Jodi Jones's quality of cross from that left-hand side is just too good not to use him on that side. But I think wing back's a really interesting position in terms of recruitment and also in terms of stylistic and tactical perspective. I think that we'll notice a big difference with the outside centre halves in the system, and that'll be the big thing. I think will be whether there's a trade off, whether it'll be the wing backs took in more, or whether the management team back their recruitment. And say we bring in another right-sided centre half who's similar speed and size to Jacob Badeau. It will then be interesting to see whether the management team actually go the opposite way and say, well, we'll keep the attacking wing backs and we'll trust our recruitment of our outside centre halves and believe in those that we've brought in the right men for that job.
So that could be an interesting way of working. So let's say we don't know that you'll keep Jodi Jones, but let's say that you do. I would say Jacob Badeau, I would be very happy to trust him in those 1v1 duels, because I think he'll be aggressive, he's quick, he's strong. I think he's going to enjoy them a lot more than Carl Cameron did at League 2 level, or does at League 2 level. But then I think maybe with Lou Macari, Lou Macari, someone who's going to need Lewis Macari, because I get confused with his dad. Lewis Macari might need a bit more protection from the right wing back, because he's maybe not going to be as quick or as strong in those 1v1 duels. So would it make sense to have a more conservative right wing back on that side when Lewis Macari plays?
Yeah, I think it would. I think it would make sense. I mean, that'll be the interesting thing. I think we'll probably sign a right-sided centre-back and probably a right wing-back. So I think we'll probably sign for both. Whether they'll both be starters is a different question. You know, you might see that we bring in a right wing-back who's a bit more, like you say, a bit more conservative, and that means Lewis Macaulay can start. Or we might go the other way and sign a right-sided centre-back, similar profile to Jacob Bideau, and that means that Aaron Nemain can start. There's not to say that Macaulay and Nemain can't start together. But like you say, I think we'd have a little bit more confidence in the side if we could do that. And I think that the biggest thing is depth and having the options to do that. Last season, it felt a little bit like when we didn't have our first choice player in a certain position, it was a huge drop off of quality. And I think that bringing in a right-sided central defender and a right wing back, maybe we use a loan for one of the two positions. I don't know, but if we can bring in someone for each position rather than just one that covers both, I think we'd have a lot greater peace of mind as a fan base. But again, I understand that it completely comes down to budgets and whether you can afford to carry that, because obviously we've got a lot of big hitters in our squad. You know, your Langstaffs, your McGoldricks, your Joneses, that they will of course naturally take up a lot of your budget. So I understand that the ideal squad scenario isn't always possible.
Of course. Another sort of moving piece of this defensive jigsaw, Tom, is the central midfield positions. Now, for me, I don't think Notts County can go into this season and say it'll be okay because Matty Palmer will be fit by, I don't know, September. I'm not 100% sure when he's back, because after such a long-term injury, you just can't rely on Matty Palmer reaching the levels that he was before. So what I think you've got to do, Tom, is basically take Matty Palmer's return as kind of a bonus. So you sign two midfielders that significantly strengthen the first 11. That's what I think you want to try and do if the budget's there. Two players that I think are defensively disciplined enough to cover where needed and who cover a lot of ground, as well as you're going to need to in a two-man midfield, especially with a high line. But yeah, I think you don't want to fall in the trap of sort of relying on Matty Palmer reaching the prior levels, because you just can't guarantee it.
No, I share that view as well. I'm glad you said that, because I understand that he's been our most important player and our best player for years and years and years. So I understand the fans' view that he's back and, you know, everything will be back to normal, and our drop off in form coincided with his departure from the side due to injury. And I think there's no coincidence in that. He's a massive part of how we play, and not just offensively but defensively as well. But I think there's definitely an attitude that he's going to come back in. He's going to be 100% Matty Palmer straight away. And I think any player who's had a long-term injury like that is going to take time to get up to speed. Jodi Jones, who's in our squad, has had several of them, and it's only really the last 18 months where he's shown his best form once again. And I know he's had a different scenario because he had back-to-back sort of long-term injuries, but the point is that it doesn't happen overnight. You can't just click your fingers and be back to your best. And so there are, I think Scott Robertson, who was brought in January, is a really good player and does a lot of the same things Matty Palmer does. Again, perhaps not quite at the level Matty Palmer is just yet, but still a fantastic addition. But I think we need a starting central midfielder to come in alongside Scott Robertson to start the season. That then gives you, like you say, the bonus of Matty Palmer coming back. It means you haven't got to rush him back. You haven't got to take a risk with him and risk another injury. You can sort of ease him back into playing. The only issue is then having a fourth choice central midfielder. That's where Gerardo Badrami would have been absolutely perfect, because he would have been a fourth choice central midfielder cover and a right-sided centre-back cover. But as I say, I think he's gone to Burton to be a starter. So I think that, you can't ask someone to stay as a cover for two positions when he's got offers to go elsewhere up the league and potentially be closer to the starting 11 than he was here. So I think that would be a position if we could get someone.
So a versatile option who can cover a few positions as well as midfield.
Definitely, even if it's it could be he covers right wing back in central midfield, or I think we need a starter in central midfield, and that would therefore give you three central midfielders who you're really confident in. Then you've got hopefully a fourth choice, and then you've got the likes of Sam Austin who can fill in there. It's not ideal, but if needs must, you can't carry 8 central midfielders. But I would like to see us add probably 2 more in there, but definitely at least one. We can't go into the season relying on Matty Palmer and Scott Robertson to play 46 of the games because A, it's not realistic, and B, Matty Palmer's has come off of the back of a extremely long-term injury.
And also you want to take some of the pressure off Matty Palmer as well, because you want him to feel like he's got time to get back to the level and he doesn't have to sort of rush himself. I think that's going to be really important as well. Yeah, from all sorts of angles, I think it makes sense what you've described there. And I wanted to talk in a little bit more detail about Scotty Robertson, because this is someone who I actually quite liked at Crewe Alexandra, even in what happened to be a really poor side that season. But I'm just wondering, he's very left-footed from one-footed on his left from last time I saw him. I don't know if that's changed. But that kind of leads me to wondering, could he play as the left-sided central midfielder, but with the sort of the idea of overlapping when Jodi Jones cuts inside from the left. So you've kind of got Jodi Jones cutting onto his right foot, and then Scotty Robertson going onto the left, and then because I think if you're one-footed, it becomes easier to sort of overlap or overload the flank rather than actually stay in the centre of the pitch where you might have to change between either foot. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting tactical idea, definitely. And yeah, I think he is still quite one-footed. He's definitely left foot dominant, that's for sure. And that can be problematic at times. I think we saw that with John Bostock, to be honest. He was very left foot dominant, and I think he struggled with that sort of two-footedness in the middle. I'd see him as a similar type to Matty Palmer in a lot of ways, in terms of he's quite safe in possession. And I think that spell at Crewe Alexandra, which you mentioned, I think that's probably where we've recruited him from. I think a lot of our recruitment is quite retrospective recruitment. We kind of look a couple of seasons ago and go, okay, he did well in that team. I think that's why we signed Charlie Colquitt. Colquitt didn't work out, but there's no way we signed him off of his season at Crewe. I think you look in retrospectively. Same with Scott Robertson. I don't think we would have looked at him at Fleetwood and gone, yeah, he's played really well in the Fleetwood side. Let's take him. He did well in a possession-based Crewe side a few years ago. Obviously, he's got pedigree from his youth days as well. Let's have a look at bringing him in. And I think that I've been really impressed with him. I've been really, really impressed with him. He's been the most surprising of our signings. And yeah, I think he's nailed on to start in central midfield at the start of the season. I really do.
Okay, well, big vote of confidence in Scotty Robertson there. So hopefully he can do that. And let's talk about that retrospective recruitment, because I actually think that when it's applied with the right level of detail, I think it can be really effective. Now, obviously, you don't want to fall into the trap of saying he did well 5 years ago, so he's going to be the same player now. But I think when it's a couple of years and when there's significant mitigating factors that mean that he didn't find the form in the sort of middle period, you can actually find some good value, because football as a market, I think, is very there's a lot of recency bias, and everyone wants the player who was really good last season. And I think that the last 12 months dictates a lot in the market of football. So I do think there's an opportunity for Notts County to actually find value with that recruitment strategy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Jodi Jones is the perfect example of it. He wasn't really playing at Oxford, and we recruited him off of his ability he showed in the past, and that has gone absolutely brilliantly. There's obviously other examples that he's probably top of one scale, and his friend Charlie Colquitt was probably the other end of the scale, came to Notts and didn't really get a minute. Didn't get much time at all. So it definitely is. I think it's a recruitment strategy that can really work and can really pay off. I think you've got to also appreciate there's going to be ones you get wrong, because there are sometimes, like you say, there's mitigating factors why they're not playing well, or there might just be a genuine decline from the player, and you can't always see that from the outside looking at a player. And there'll be ones that genuinely get wrong, but I do think there may be one or two we bring in this summer who haven't had the greatest 12 months, or maybe even 18 months, 24 months. But you look at their sort of prior, then the 2 years before that, they were at the top of their game. And I think that was similar with Jodi Jones. And there's huge value to be had in that market, because there's players, I mean, take, for example, Toby Savin at Accrington. I think there's a goalkeeper there who, I'm not saying we'll go for him, but I think there's a goalkeeper there that if we went for him, I can see the value and why we've gone for that, because 18 to 24 months ago, Savin was kind of touted for championship moves, and now Accrington, he's not really had much of a game over the last 12 months. So there's players in the market. You're operating in a very competitive market, and you have to find the value somewhere. And I think that with our model, the way that knots work, that sometimes is how we find that value.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Jodi Jones there, and I had mixed feelings when he won Player of the Year in League Two last season, Tom, because there was part of me thinking this lad really deserves it because he was amazing to watch last season. The way he cuts inside and curls those shots and creates and his deliveries at Grimsby for Macaulay Langstaff were absolutely obscene, and the level of his quality that he provided last season lay well above League Two. And yet there's also part of me that feels like he is at least partially culpable for the defensive vulnerabilities Notts County had last season. And if we're going to say that it makes it all the more impressive for him to deliver that kind of output, to smash the assists record as a wing-back, because the wing-back role involves more defensive responsibility, then that also comes with more defensive responsibility that sometimes he neglected a little bit. And that's where I feel like him taking all the plaudits and all the awards for his great individual season, whilst the team actually suffered defensively and weren't great as a collective, there was part of me that actually didn't, that felt a little bit sort of unsure about that. And that's where I feel a little bit contradicted, possibly. An incredible player to watch. He's been brilliant going forward. But for me, I really want to see him try and switch on defensively a little bit more next season, because that's a crucial step for me in Notts County becoming that more efficient side.
Yeah, no, I completely appreciate what you're saying, and I think you made a good point with if you're going to say it's a more impressive record because he's a wing back, you then have to take the defensive side of that wing back role into consideration. I completely hear that. I think we'll have to agree to disagree on his player of the season. I think he deserved it thoroughly, because I think anyone that sort of smashes the assist record, and obviously there's an inherent level of bias there, of course,
yeah,
because he's not a county player. So I have to try and be as unbiased as possible. But having seen him play, he's just unbelievable. The assist record, it's not a surprise. He probably could have had more at times. The quality of his cross into the box is absolutely absurd. It's such a high level. It's such a level above League Two, and I think we'll be lucky to hold on to him this summer. Maybe we'll be fortunate in terms of the position he's played. Ideally, he plays a winger. Like that is his position, really. And he's playing as a wing back in a system that is getting the best out of him, really, because it gets him into those wide left areas with time on the ball, time to put in a great delivery, great cross. But I hear what you're saying completely. And of course, there's games like the Crew game where obviously later on he gives away the penalty with the handball, and you can see it's not his forte. It's not his area of expertise being defending the box. But I think that when you get a level of output out of a player like Jodi Jones in a system that, like I say, is giving him time and space on the ball, perhaps more so than a winger would, because he's in a wing-back position, he can get wider, he can get slightly more time on the ball. I think that it's 100% worth it. And I think that it won't surprise me to see him get 10, 15, I think 20 assists would be hard to do back-to-back seasons. I think that would be, unbelievable. But I wouldn't surprise to see him get 10 or 15 assists again next season. Of course, depending on whether he stays, which I really hope he does. He's only got a year left on his contract, but he's the kind of player that I think that, depending on the offers you get for him, we've done it before with players like Carl Wootton. I know we're talking about a different profile of player and different profile of club coming in for him, but we've done it before with players. We've let them run down their contract and let them, Ruben Rodriguez, let them go on a free rather than sell them for cheap, because the value you get out of that player over the next 12 months, it could be the difference. Jodi Jones' assist could be the difference between us finishing in a playoff position next season and not.
Yeah, and certainly the quality that he brings is absolutely on a different planet to anything else I've seen in League Two, and he was a joy to watch last season. I wanted to come to you on Aaron Nemain, Tom. Do you see him starting regularly next year?
It's a difficult one with Aaron, because I think he's the most improved player under Stuart Maynard. I think he's the most improved player. I was probably quite critical of him at the start of the season because, especially when McGoldrick was playing really well, you had McGoldrick, Crowley, Langstaff, and Jones, and the main as a five-man attack. And the first four players I mentioned there were well into double figures for goal contributions. I think they all might have ended with, most of them ended with double figures for both. I know Jodi wouldn't end up with double figures for goals, but they all finished with well over 20 goal contributions, whereas Aaron was severely behind at one stage, and then he hit a bit of a form of scoring and assisting, and towards the back end of the season, like I say, he was our most improved player. He's very much a confidence player, and again, he's similar to Jodi Jones in that he gets a lot of time and space in this system. He's not quite as, he hasn't got the quality delivery that Jodi Jones has, but then he's got other qualities in terms of his pace over a 5-10 yard space is unbelievable, and he can really drive into the box. And his link up with Dan Crowley at the opening portion of the season was absolutely excellent, and I hope we see that return if we can bring in some central midfielders behind Crowley, which allow Crowley to play further forward and get his link up with Aaron and Main going again. I think we 100% need another right wing back, whether that's to start instead of Aaron or if that's just to push and compete with Aaron. I think he needs someone in that role that's really pushing him, because Toby Alderweireld-Rowling, great character, but he didn't really push Aaron for a starting position last season. I don't think there's many games where you had any doubt who was going to start in that role, and I think you need that for any competitive sort of work environment. I think you need that.
Of course, yeah, competition certainly helps. So then let's come on to the number 10 position, Tom. And one thing that I think is going to be really important for Notts County to balance is Dan Crowley and Dave McGoldrick bring obvious quality, even if McGoldrick didn't quite hit the heights you were maybe hoping for last season. But out of your attacking midfield options, those two bring the most quality. However, I also think a really important part of your National League playoff winning success, and the reason why you got to 107 points and the reason why you didn't actually concede so many goals in that season, was because you were so aggressive in the press, and it meant that you weren't caught out as much by that high defensive line. And so what's the balance? What does the balance look like for Notts County between getting as much quality as possible on the pitch, but also making sure you're really aggressive against the ball and you're constantly pressurising the opposition when they've got the ball?
Yeah, he's spot on with that. I think the difference if you put Sam Austin and Ruben Rodriguez against Dave McGoldrick and Dan Crowley as a pair, I think on the ball quality there's not much to choose. In fact, you'd probably go for McGoldrick and Crowley as a duo as having more on the ball quality, but off the ball work rate. It's not just work rate; it's intelligence of press as well. Understanding when to go. I think there's no question that that's the biggest thing we've lost with Ruben Rodriguez going. I think the recruitment team did a brilliant job, in fact, a perfect job of replacing his on-the-ball qualities with Dan Crowley. I think they replicated it perfectly. And like I say, I think they actually probably got a player who is perhaps slightly better on the ball than Ruben Rodriguez. Not much in it. Dan Crowley got more open play goals than Ruben. His intelligence, the runs, he got so many headed goals last season because his footballing brain is just unbelievable. You can see why he was so highly rated at Arsenal and things like that. And that's not me questioning his work rate. I think his work rate is actually it improved as the season went on. But for pressing, it's not just about working hard. You can a bad press can be someone working really hard to close down, but then the ball's played round them and there's a massive gap left. And it's understanding when to press, and that's what Ruben Rodriguez was so good at. He was such an aggressive presser, but such an intelligent one. He led our press, and we've lost him. Obviously, 12 months ago, we've lost Jim O'Brien this summer, who I know probably wouldn't have been a starter, but he's probably the other player that has that understanding and know-how of how and when to press. So to answer your question about how do you balance it, I don't think we'll bring in another 10. I don't think that it's a position we necessarily need to strengthen in. And I think because of the amount of positions and players we're bringing in, I can't see us bringing in a player as well. I think the budget wouldn't stretch to that. But I think the player to balance that out is Sam Austin. I think that we saw last season, he's a victim of his versatility, 100%. I think he has been his whole career. Even at Kidderminster, he played hundreds of games for them, but he played as a right back for them for years and years because he was so versatile. And he has got that intelligence, and he must be a joy to coach because he just takes every bit of information on board. You can just tell that the way he plays. So I think the way you balance it is he plays a little bit more in the 10, which he has played, and I think it's probably a role he enjoys because he gives that pressing, he gives that ability and know how when to press. And the other way you counteract it is you play with just 1-10 and you put, and we're going to come on to forwards, I'm sure, but Langstaff as well is a very good, intelligent presser. And I think Alassane Jatta as well, from his time in Denmark, where he perhaps he's come to League Two. I know we're going to get onto forward, but he's come to League Two and he looks like he's got loads of quality. But in Denmark, it's a different level, so he had to find his role almost as a pressing forward, as a defensive forward. Right. So I think that maybe the counteracting of it will either be getting Sam Austin in that team, or going with 2 up front and those 2, and perhaps having just Dan Crowley or just David McGoldrick in behind, because whilst early on we were creating loads of chances, we definitely were weaker in that because McGoldrick lacks mobility now, and Dan Crowley, like I say, Dan Crowley's excellent, but perhaps his defensive nous isn't quite at the level that we had with Ruben Rodriguez.
Yeah, well, it's funny with McGoldrick because I remember seeing an interview with Paul Warne on League 72 channel, and he said he was actually really surprised by Dave McGoldrick's work rate at Derby. But I guess it shows that when a player gets to, I think 36 is the age McGoldrick is now, you always do carry that extra bit of risk that the next season could be a significant dip in certain attributes, especially in areas like mobility and work rate, that you've just always got to be a bit mindful of that. So maybe that's been the case to some extent with McGoldrick, but also maybe next season, if he's not starting every game, maybe he'll have a bit more freshness and sharpness to actually contribute when he does play. So that could make a difference. But yeah, so the 2 up top would definitely be interesting. And I suppose one thing that feeds into that argument that you've made is that Sedwin Scott has has had his option taken up. So this is basically the club has had the opportunity to release Sedwin Scott, and they've not taken it. So that suggests that they've kept at least 3 forwards. Maras might be offloaded, I don't know, but possibly 4, which would actually lean towards your point, which is, are they going to go for 2 up top at times next season?
Yeah, I forgot to mention Scott. He can play in that sort of 10. When we played the 2 10s in the National League, he often played as the left-sided 10 and would cut in onto his stronger right foot. Hopefully we'll get to see that. His sort of trademark move is cut in on the right and then shoot near post, and that change of direction, it seemed to work every single time, even though you knew what was going to happen. And he's a hard worker, and he's actually quite a decent presser as well. So he could be another answer to that question if he can get up to full fitness. But I think that because we've signed Alassane Jatta, we paid a lot of money for him. I think we paid a 6-figure fee. Right. You've got Macaulay Langstaff, who's now the club captain, and I mean, there's no doubt he starts every game. It's Macaulay Langstaff, top goal scorer in the league, so you can't not start him. Sure. I think you've got 2 forwards there where I hate saying a player has to start because you've paid a fee for him, etc. I hate saying that, but it almost does feel a little bit like, would you pay that for a backup forward who's going to sit on the bench? I don't think you would. And I think when we've seen him play, Jatta's goal record in the short period of time he had was absolutely excellent. He gave us a different outlet. Like I say, he's not just a big man who stands there. He's very mobile. He's very hardworking. I think we probably will go to up top. I think we probably will start the season with Jatta and Langstaff as the pair. And it's interesting you mentioned Junior Moraes, because I was thinking it's risky to go to up top. You have got the flexibility if one gets injured to go back to the 2 10s, and I'm sure we'll do that anyway. There might be times where you start 2 up top and then you win in a game, you take one of the forwards off, go to the 2 10s. But Junior Moraes does give you that squad depth. Again, he can play behind the striker or up front as well. So there's plenty of versatility and flexibility up front for us, and lots of firepower with Jatta and Langstaff as well.
One thing with that in mind then, Tom, because that's changed, that definitely changes the dynamics of the team, I think, really positively from a point of view of pressing, because if you've got 2 centre forwards up there, you can engage the opposition centre halves much better. So I think that could be a really positive step. At the same time, if you've got 2 centre forwards and possibly Dan Crowley in the number 10 role, when Dan Crowley was amazing last season in possession, that means that the work ethic of your central midfielders has got to be absolutely on point because, well, I suppose it makes the central midfielders hard to recruit for because if we're saying the centre halves aren't going to need to have as big a passing range next season because it's going to be the midfielders, and then you were also saying Notts County are going to have two up top and a bit of a luxury number 10, that's going to have your central midfielders are going to carry a big responsibility because they're going to be the ones that get the attack, get the ball moving and get the attack started. But they're also going to be the ones that have got to cover loads of ground in a tip. I'm so passionate about this. I've just knocked my light over that. That they've got to cover a lot of ground as well. So yeah, that's going to make the central midfielders a little bit harder to recruit for, possibly.
100%. I think having this conversation has actually made me convinced that Aaron Domain will probably play at right wing back because if you've got the two forwards, you kind of want someone pushing up in that wider area on the right. So I think Aaron Domain will start there.
Mm-hmm.
I think ideal world you have Matty Palmer because he does that job. He can cover so much ground. But like we've spoken about, I don't want to rush him back. So I think you need perhaps an athletic central midfielder, someone who's got unbelievable work rate, who's tidy enough on the ball. An ideal player would have been Ashley Charles, who is at Bromley now, was at Wealdstone under the management. He would be ideal because he just kept everything so tidy for Wealdstone and covered so much ground for them. And I think that they'll probably look to recruit a similar type to that. I don't think it'll be him because he's obviously signed a contract at Bromley, and I can't see us paying too many fees this summer for players. But I think that someone of that ilk, someone who's got the legs covering midfield, hasn't necessarily got to be amazing on the ball, has to be tidy on the ball. But like you say, it's kind of doing that cover work, getting around the pitch, and then getting the ball into that front five. If you've got Nemain, Crowley or McGoldrick, Jatta, Langstaff, and Jones as your front five, it kind of is your midfield role is win the ball back and get to them as quickly as possible because that front five should cause most defences a lot of problems.
Yeah, certainly should. I'm really excited to see after having this conversation how it all comes together. But Tom, expectations for next season, because you could easily this time last year there was so much optimism about Notts County, and I absolutely shared that. I had Notts County winning the league, right? So there was just literally every conversation about Notts County, almost every conversation was emphatically positive. And yet the conversation we're having this year feels maybe a bit more balanced and a bit more realistic. And I just wonder, the expectations are more guarded this year. And yet I also wonder whether that could be quite a healthy thing for Notts County because the club are going in with the lessons that have been learned. Again, I'm widening my arms out. The lessons have been learned from the last 12 months could make what's already a really smart club very well prepared for next season, possibly more prepared than you were this time last year because you've got your idea of how you want to play, but you've also got more evidence, more insight into how to make it work in reality at this level. So with that in mind, I suppose, how do you weigh up the expectations for Notts County next season?
Oh yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You've absolutely smashed it there. And I think last season, everyone expected, including outside the club, inside the club, fans, etc., everyone expected us to go back to back, I think, or at least be in the playoffs and knocking that door. I think there was just such a wave of momentum. We were riding such a crest of a wave. It was unbelievable. But and because we started so strongly, it was like, wow, this is going to happen. And it didn't happen. But I think that this season is actually quite nice going into it. I don't think there's actually any real expectation. I don't think a Notts fan, if you ask me right now, where do you think we'll finish? I don't really know. I think we could finish from anywhere between where we finished this season. You could make a great case to say we're a playoff team. And I think I'm not going to make that case again this season. I've learned my lessons. But I think a lot of people might have us as dark horses for the top three. I do think that I'm not going to put us there myself. But I think that if you look at a team and are going to try and pick someone that can come through the pack who didn't quite finish the season as strongly, etc., I think Notts County will be on the top of a lot of people's lists because of that firepower and because there are lessons, and hopefully we've learned from them this season. So yeah, I'm quietly and cautiously optimistic. I'd be absolutely delighted with a playoff finish. And I don't see any reason why we can't. There's no reason why. I think any team is quite an open division next season. I think any team can could finish in top three. I think that's how open it is, and there's no reason why we can't do that with the amount of attacking ability we've got. I think we've got to be more realistic, temper our expectations ever so slightly. But like I say, I think there's a reason why. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that a lot of people will have us as dark horses, if you can call us that, next
I
season.
think it'll be very split in terms of outsiders, because I think there'll be some people. I actually think a lot of people will look at the defensive issues and say they can't defend and therefore they're not going to be in the promotion mix. I don't want to give too much away, but I think I'm probably going to be slightly more sort of hopeful based on the defensive. The fact that Platt and Bedo have been the first additions, I think, is a real insight that the club knows that they've got problems that they need to fix. And that sort of realism and that awareness of what's required gives me some encouragement for sure.
Yeah, definitely, and me too. And that's why again, I'm not trying to give too much away, and I actually don't know where I put us right now. There's certain clubs in League Two where I'm pretty confident, give or take 2 or 3 places either way. I'm pretty confident where they go. Right now, there's probably a 10-place swing I could argue for us, but I'm leaning toward, after this conversation we've had as well, I'm definitely leaning toward more optimism going into the season than being negative and saying, well, it'll be a similar season to last season, which, by the way, isn't terrible. Establishing yourself as a League Two side after coming up isn't terrible, but I think the club is ambitious. I think that we want to keep moving in a positive direction, and I think that we will. There's still question marks, of course, and we won't know till we see the probably first 5 or 10 games. But even then, last season we saw the first 5 or 10 games and probably wouldn't have thought we'd finished as low as we did. So I think that it's and look at Doncaster. They came through the pack late on and probably could and probably should have gone up. So I think that obviously there's loads of factors still to play out this summer, but I'm definitely leaning towards more cautiously optimistic is how I would say.
The central midfield signing or signings will definitely dictate a lot for me in terms of where I think Notts County will finish. So that it all, a lot of it hangs in that for me. So Tom, with everything that we've discussed, we've got to talk about Macaulay Langstaff, by the way, just in a bit more detail, just because of how important he was last season. For me, he would be Player of the Year for Notts County last season. Just talk to me about his importance, because I think it's really important that we delve into a bit more detail on him.
Yeah, I mean, he's captain of the club now, and I think that speaks volumes of him as a character, as a leader. On the pitch, he leads the press, and I think he'll lead the club as well. He's a record goal scorer for a reason. He loves scoring goals. Again, arguably, he could have had more last season. But I think that he will probably get similar, if not more, this season. I think, he's fantastic. He's absolutely fantastic. And it appears he's kind of given interviews suggesting he's going to stay. The captaincy would suggest he's pretty much on board to stay. So such a huge bonus for us. And I think he'll score 25 plus again. And if he does that, he'll be getting towards our, not our record, but he'll be moving closer all the time. So yeah, I think he is an excellent player and an excellent leader on and off the pitch. Clearly, they value him, and I think that this season could be another big one for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Just final question on the possibility of a front two with him and Jatta. I imagine you'll want Jatta pinning himself against other centre halves next season. So do you think Langstaff is capable of dropping in at times and linking up the play with Crowley next season?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a period where he actually played. We went to a sort of 4-2-3-1 towards in the new manager's sort of early spell, and he played out wide where he has played before. Link-up play is definitely his one of the. I don't want to call it weak. He's not weak in that area, but he's a weaker aspect of his game. Possibly why it's it might hold him back from getting that championship move. I don't know, But I think that he's got the ability, and I think actually Jata's got the ability to drop in and link up play.
Okay.
Actually,
Interesting.
yeah, he's a really interesting player, Jata. He looks like a archetypal sort of hold it up, but he actually thrives on spinning in behind and actually will drop in and link play as well. So
Okay.
Jata's a really interesting one for sure, and I'll be interested to see how he gets on with a full pre-season. But him and Langstaff as a partnership, if they can get sort of an understanding going of when one drops, one goes, then it could be really, really exciting.
Certainly could. So, with just to condense everything that we've discussed in this podcast, Tom, what would be the reasons to believe that Notts County can achieve their ambitions this season, which I think we've sort of agreed would be a top 7 finish?
I think if you look at the attack again, I know it sounds like I'm not learning from the lesson of last season, but we had the second most goals, I think, and one of, if not the best attack in the league now that other teams have gone. You have to any team has to be optimistic when they've got that much firepower, that much quality in their team. And I think the other reason is the lessons that we've learned. That hopefully we've learned, and it appears that we're addressing them. Our first two signings are both central defenders, and I think that should speak volumes of. Hopefully we've learned from that, and we know what the problem is. We're addressing the problem, and we've got to be optimistic for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what would be the reasons to doubt whether Notts County can achieve their ambitions?
I guess the question marks would be whether we have learned from the lessons. It's the same again. If we just, even when I'm talking about it here, I'm focusing on the attacking players, and hopefully, whilst we have to keep that attacking onus, we can't neglect the defence like we perhaps did last season. At the same time, the other reason is that we perhaps go too far the other way and then lose our attacking element, and then we end up being kind of in the middle at both, like a bit better defensively, a bit worse offensively, and we kind of end up somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And that could be another reason. And I guess the final reason would be support for the manager. I'm 100% behind him, but if the fan base doesn't unite quite early on, the Notts fan base is quite vocal, and I think it at times it became quite a hostile environment and atmosphere. And whilst the club statement definitely we spoke out at the start of the podcast allayed those fears at that time, whether they could pull that sort of trick again, I'm not sure. So whether the support is there early on could possibly dictate how this season goes.
Yeah, a good start would certainly help, wouldn't it? And then final question. Too early for a prediction, obviously, because too much it's still so early, and a lot can happen in the between now and the end of the window. Give me a number between 1 and 10 to denote your level of optimism for the season ahead.
I'll go for a very. I'm sure a lot of people say it's 7. I'm sure it's going to be probably the most popular answer.
I get 7 a lot.
Yeah, I'm going to say sure that's the answer you're going to get the most. Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think the signings have been good. We've got a very good squad and team as it is. I personally have got faith in the management team. So maybe I should push up to an 8, but I'm going to stick with a 7. I think that it will hinge on the next 2 to 3 weeks who we get in or who we don't get in, and who leaves, etc. But if the season started tomorrow, there would definitely be holes in our squad. But I think we also have probably a better squad than a lot of teams do at this stage. So there's probably reason to be optimistic based on that alone.
Certainly is. Tom, it's been such a pleasure to have you on this podcast. One of my favourites that I've done. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive. Subscribe on YouTube and on Spotify. Leave us a review if you like. And we'll see you again very soon.